For this week, I chose two suttas. Two suttas that are very intriguing, very helpful in the kind of teaching they provide, because they speak about things that we take it as obvious parts of our existence, our life, especially in the context of the Dhamma that we practice. So it's a joint sutta. It's one of those sessions that I've done this before, this format of including not just one sutta, as normally that's what I do, but for today it's a double sutta. And they come from the Samyutta Nikāya, the connected discourses, and they are from the Rādha Sutta, or Samyutta. One is called Māra Sutta, a very intriguing subject, a very influential presence in the Dhamma, in a sense. The one that is often referred to as the evil one, Māra Sutta. And then the other one is Satta Sutta. They come right, they are next to each other. 23.1 and 23.2 of the Samyutta Nikāya. Māra Sutta. And we're going to see how Lord Budha, as he normally does, he's not going to give the answer that one would presume he's going to, as in, yes, this is Māra, this is who he is, this is where he lives, this is his address, no. We're going to see how Lord Budha goes after the jugular. The questioner, including ourselves, 26 centuries later, wondering as to what is Māra. We've talked about Māra in many suttas throughout these series. So who is or what is Māra? Is a key question for us to understand. It's not an esoteric question. It's not a metaphysical question that only those individuals who are interested in the beyond could ask. No, this is a legitimate question. I will kind of preface it before we dive into the suttas, one after the other. But before we do that, I will venture in saying, or in asking another question, this time from ourselves, how long do you want to stay in this samsara? A question, a legitimate question to ask ourselves, each of us. How long do I want to stay in samsara? Especially when you're all alone, when you're, things are okay or not okay even. Having that heart-to-heart conversation with yourself, a very powerful question. How long do I want to stay in this samsara? How long do I want to loiter around, window shopping endlessly through what this life offers? And what it offers is essentially is the result of the good actions you've done in the past, the intentional good actions you've done in the past. That's why you are born in a human body. That's why you have your eyes still functioning, your ears still functioning, a central nervous system that functions. legs that function, digestion that function, and everything else that comes along to support your existence. So how much longer are we going to skulk around in samsara, being entertained and amused by the world that's offered to you every minute by the senses? The six senses, the mind, the eyes, of course, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body. Window shopping with the world through these windows. How much time does it need to pass from underneath our feet as the credits run out and we are back festering in continued misery? Remember here last week's theme with the Dhamma Sutta from the Anguttara Nikāya, which we covered, and how Lord Budha was saying that so long as there are these three things he mentioned, right? Birth, getting old or aging, things fall apart. They're not working as beautifully, as seamlessly as they used to. And death. These three things, birth, aging, and death, so long as these things exist, the Tathagatas, the Buddhas will appear and they will teach the Dhamma. Otherwise, there's no reason for the Tathagata to show up. But we still have those. Many of us are just enjoying the ride of past actions, that we look at ourselves and our faculties, our resources, and say, well, I have this, so let me still go on with this. Meanwhile, the conveyor belt is taking us from one birth, death to another, and in between there's a lot of misery, until we find ourselves in a new body, a new environment, a new family, but not so new, because the abundance of resources you may have had are not there. The ones that you had in the previous life, you're now in a different body, another set of circumstances, and not even the memory to remember as to what they were. But you still have the drive. You still have that drive, that wanting to go after the likes and pushing away, running away from the dislikes. That is still there with you, stronger than ever. So, in the light of that, it's important for us to see the senses, because that's what the senses are trying to do. They are there to tell us where the likes are, where the dislikes are, and what we should completely ignore. And we're going to see how Lord Budha is going to bring this into the forefront of showing us the relationship that Māra has to all of this. So, with that, let us begin the first sutta. It is, therefore, SN 23.1, Samyutta Nikāya 23.1, the connected discourses, and it is from the Khanda Vagga Samyutta, the group of connected discourses dealing with the khandas, or the aggregates. The sub-grouping of that is the Rādha Samyutta. Rādha is referring to Venerable Rādha, who has a section dedicated to him, because he apparently was one of those bhikkhus who kept coming to Lord Budha asking questions, but not to be an annoying student. Seriously, he was asking some key questions, but very short questions, but that would open up a totally new vista to understand the Dhamma with. So the elders in the first council, they arranged a whole section of the Samyutta Nikāya dedicated to these discourses that were instigated by Venerable Rādha. So it is under the Rādha Samyutta, and it is coming from the collection called the Patama Māra Vagga. In this section, you're going to find a lot of questions coming up about Māra. Because everyone had said something, and there's a different ideas, this and that. Sometimes you will see him be personified. They actually, Lord Budha has many encounters with Māra. If you recall from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, which we've done a few years ago, you see how Māra comes in. He never fully leaves. He's always trying to dissuade Lord Budha as well as the other Aryas, noble disciples of his. So this one is from the section on Māra, part 1. Patama is part 1. So this sutta is called Māra Sutta. In English, I translated it as who or what is Māra. Let's begin. Once, while the Blessed One was residing in Savatthi, the Venerable Rādha went and approached him, and after respectfully paying homage to the teacher, he sat to one side and began asking a question. Bhante, people keep exclaiming, oh, this is Māra, or that was Māra. But Bhante, who or what exactly is being referred to here by the term Māra? So we can really genuinely appreciate the realism and practicality of Venerable Rādha's question here. As he continues, how is one to clearly get a definition of this Māra? And here's Lord Buddha's answer. Rādha, while encountering any kind of form, rupa in Pali, it is necessary to know how that form itself could be none other than Māra himself. That is, the form one is witnessing may end up ultimately being there to trap and assassinate him, to murder and destroy him. And thus, form becomes the very representative of death, the gateway and the means by which the person ends up being stuck in the cycles of death itself. Definitely what was not expected by Venerable Rādha, is, if we can imagine, assume, in receiving such an instruction, it's so thorough, it's so packed. The answer, he didn't describe Māra's appearance, he didn't describe him as a person outside of him. Remember, this sutta comes from the grander collection of connected discourses called, as I mentioned, Khandavagga, Khandha, the aggregates. So here we have, that's why we see why it was placed within that group of connected discourses, this sutta that is. It is because Lord Buddha is now addressing the first of the khandhas, rupa. Remember, the person is comprised of, there is no soul in Buddhism, and at least in the proper Buddhism, as we talk about, as we describe, as the original teachings of Lord Budha, from the historical Buddha. So there's no soul. There's no entity that carries on from life to life, basically changing the body as a robe, changing it as a set of clothing that you just go in and remove, undress, and put on new life, while it's the same body that carries. There's no such thing. There's no atta as such. There's no soul as such in Buddhism. Instead, Lord Budha presented the five aggregates. He said, this is all a matter of causality and conditions coming together at a certain time under certain conditions. Certain requirements have to be there for these five, and it's a very precarious situation. It's like a chemical equation that must be balanced. If anything is removed or added more than necessary, the whole thing collapses. The person dies, or the person is now a handicapped person, or there's a mental retardation, or there is something else going on, but the person is not a full person. So rupa is number one in the khandas, right? So here Lord Budha is saying, you're asking me about Māra. Who is or what is Māra? He says, you must look upon rupa itself as a representative of Māra, as an assassin of Māra, as the gateway to death, meaning the thing that will keep you continuously in the realms of samsara, one after the other. Rupa. Now, can we look upon things? When we say rupa, usually people understand rupa as form, as something solid, right? But rupa can also be about the thing that is solid, or it could be a sound, right? It doesn't have a tangible shape to it necessarily, although some creative individuals would describe the sound in shapes, in forms, etc. But sound could also be a reference to form. Similarly with the smell. Similarly with the touch, etc. So you see, I'm referring here to the six senses in relation to rupa. So it's important for us to understand rupa also through the lens of the six senses. I was mentioning earlier about, I think the term I used was window shopping with life, through life, going about life, mesmerized by what the six senses bring. Well, here we can start with rupa. And Lord Buddha is saying, you want to know what Māra is? There he is. Your relationship with rupa is Māra personified. So you're carrying Māra with you, given your relationship to form. Can you handle that? Can you allow yourself to absorb that? Lord Buddha continues, therefore, Rādha, you must constantly be vigilant in knowing and seeing that any kind of form could be Māra himself. Wow. How could you know? How could you be alert enough to detect that any kind of form that you are witnessing, not just with the eyes, remember, could be a sound. Is or could be representative of Māra. So we are disengaging ourselves from being sucked in, identified with the experience, taking it personally. You're thinking, I'm over here, it or you over there. This is the relationship. This is where we also come to the asmimana, the conceit am or I am versus you over there, you are. And usually it comes with other stuff, right? I'm right, you're wrong. Or I am above you, or I'm beneath you, or we are equal. That's conceit through and through. But that is where, that's the fertile soil that Māra loves to hang out. You can grow more and more ignorance out of that. But again, how are you able to see, to know that form can be a representative Māra? When there is sati. When there is yoniso manasikara, that's why we have to maintain sati all the time. You lose sati, you open the gates of hell. How about that? Ignorance is the main door taking us straight to hell, straight to more samsaric existences, rebirths, back to back. Ignorance. Well, where does the ignorance come from? Remember, I gave another definition for avidya, or ignorance. I was terming it as willfully ignoring, intentionally ignoring, and that's what absence of sati is, essentially. That's what absence of yoniso manasikara is, not placing your attention wisely on that thing that is taking place, meaning contact. The absence of that means Māra has a carte blanche to be present in your existence, in your everyday moment. Why? Because sati is absent. When sati is absent, sila is absent. True sila is absent. Even if your behavior looks like it is augmented or about sila, but it is only skin deep. It's not true sila. It can't be. Because the heart is not involved. The heart can only get involved when there is sati. So you see, it's multi-pronged. It's got so many different connections with other factors of our existence. Lord Budha continues, that is, the form could be there, as a matter of fact, to simply trap and assassinate you, to murder and destroy you. Because ultimately, form is the very representative of death, the gateway and the means by which you end up being stuck in the cycles of death itself. So, you must strive to see form as none other than a wound that keeps oozing with pus, a disease or sickness to heal from. You should look upon form as a poisonous arrow, a miserable pain, and the very source itself of such misery. For this reason, those who indeed have the right vision, that is, the ability to correctly see from form for what it truly is, are the ones who witness and experience form in just this manner, Rādha. So he's saying all those who have right vision, jnana dassana, to be able to see this. Again, without sati, it's not going to happen. Sati is the one that will put the spotlight on your relationship with this form that you're seeing, you're touching, you're smelling, you're tasting, etc. Where you have a position towards this thing that you are witnessing, experiencing, meaning rupa. Already, when you do it this way, guess what happened? The glue that attaches rupa to the other four aggregates is loosening up. Have you ever taken like glue and something, especially if you glued recently, maybe like paper glue or something like that, and you put it over steam, water that's boiling, and you hold it above the steam, guess what happens? The glue comes off, and this thing that was attached all of a sudden starts getting loose and it falls. Why? Because you exposed it to the heat of wisdom, in this case, of sati. So you're no longer are an infant or infantile, have an infantile approach to life, specifically rupa. Many of us are very much attached to rupa under the guise of practicing the Dhamma, which is an oxymoron. You can't have both, which means there is a lack in sati. Now, how do we know these things? How can we come to know these things? We come to know these things, not by repeating to ourselves things that we liked about the Dhamma or somebody else saying about the Dhamma, but we have to come to the actual teachings. Many people, including monastics, have no clue about these suttas. Did you know that? No clue. They've never read them. They've never listened to them. But that's why these are being presented, retranslated so that they can be reintroduced to the world. So now we have no excuses, basically. It's there, freely available. So it's not a matter of us knowing, oh yeah, we don't have a soul in Buddhism, but we do have the five aggregates. Okay, some people can memorize it or can tell you, can write a thesis on it, but when it comes down to the actual method of breaking apart these five aggregates while you're alive through the Dhamma practice, how to go about doing it, they have no clue. The method is lost. Well, actually, it's not lost because it's still there in the suttas, clearly as we can see. But we need to practice it. So once we do get the information, we need to practice it, to apply it, so that it doesn't stay as learning about the Dhamma, hearing about, listening about, knowing about. No, it's not an about affair. It's personally experienced by the ones who are called wise, because they don't take any chances with their life. They don't play, as they say, Russian roulette with this existence, because now you have these resources, valuable resources as a human being alive. At the end of this life, when death comes, unless you are a Sotapanna, you're back, most probably, in misery. Very few possibilities are there out of billions, because we've done so much more akusala actions that the next life would and could take us to a lower state with less resources. And we cannot count on the good that we've been doing in this life. If you recall from a few weeks ago, we talked about the Kamma, Mahakamma Vibhanga Sutta. Lord Budha was so exquisitely explaining how you shouldn't count on the good deeds you've done, because you might still end up in hell. Why? Because the weight of the previous actions from previous lives, or even at the moment of your death, despite the fact that you've done so many good deeds, might be enough of a weight to take you straight to a lower realm. Even if it's for a brief moment, like it was with Queen Mallika. So a wise person does never take any such stupid risks with one's life. That's why Dhamma has to be number one in one's life. Priority number one. Until the person gets to that understanding, and no one can force you to. Your wisdom can. When you start maturing and understanding, oh my, what am I doing? All these other things that I tell myself, these have to be first fulfilled, met, and then I'll do this. This as in practicing sati, practicing constantly, understanding the Dhamma. Now Lord Budha talks about the second aggregate. Rādha, while encountering any kind of feeling, Vedana, it is necessary to know how that feeling itself could be none other than Māra himself. That is, the feeling one is witnessing may end up ultimately being there to trap and assassinate him, to murder and destroy him. And thus, feeling becomes the very representative of death, the gateway and the means by which the person ends up being stuck in the cycles of death itself. The society we live in is based on feelings, how you feel. And usually we're always running after the good feeling, the pleasurable feeling. We spent countless amounts of money as a population on this planet to try to secure some type of an enjoyable feeling. People can't wait for summer to come around for them to go to this very, or the warm season to come for them to go to this very famous beach that they've seen on, I don't know, some app somewhere, advertised somewhere. And they get there after so many long haul flights, such long hours, difficulties and expenses, nerves going wild. And then they finally get there, and they see it's packed by billions of people who had the same idea as you. Well, where's the enjoyable feeling then? That's another way of looking at feeling. So we are already in misery. And this is where we also can remind ourselves of feeling is the likes and dislikes I was referring to earlier. Because if I have a like or if I have a dislike, already it means I have a contract with Māra. Māra's there. He's sitting comfy, cozy in the middle of my heart, in the middle of my chitta, dominating. He's in the cockpit. He's in the driver's seat of your life. Why? Because you are led on, just like in parts of the world, especially I've seen this in Asia, not just in Asia, of course, wherever there's oxen or buffalo or cows, many places they will put this ring around the cow's nose or the ox's nose. Terrible, but they will attach it, they pull it. So basically that is how we are being led, with that ring, nose ring, painful nose ring. It's not a fashion statement like people have been doing in recent decades. No, the nose ring of feeling that drags us from birth, death, and every miserable occasion in between. Therefore, Rādha, you must constantly be vigilant in knowing and seeing that any kind of feeling could be Māra himself. That is, the feeling could be there as a matter of fact, to simply trap and assassinate you, to murder and destroy you. Because ultimately, feeling is the very representative of death, the gateway and the means by which you end up being stuck in the cycles of death itself. Feeling is just feeling. It doesn't need our commentary. It doesn't need our bonding contract with it. It doesn't require us to identify. But that is what we use. This is where the personality part comes in, becomes more crystallized. Remember the five aggregates. The five aggregates, this is the second one. This is a big one. Vedana, the first was Rupa. Vedana is the feeling. This also, as the case was with Rupa, so long as you have proper sati, when the feeling is happening, it doesn't mean that you will not have a like or a dislike, a painful headache, for example. It doesn't say go ahead and embrace that. No. You're observing it, but you are observing it for what it is. You're looking at the causal factors. If you didn't have a head, you wouldn't have a headache, right? If you weren't alive, you wouldn't have a headache. For example, if something else happens, life-threatening situation, guess what? Your adrenal glands will work. Your endocrine system will work in such a way. Well, blood will be transported into different parts of your body. Suddenly, the headache will be gone. You won't feel it. Why? Because you're running away from this lion that's attacking you, pouncing, trying to catch you. So we are being pulled out from this identification with what? A self idea? Yes. But it is perpetuated by this perverted view that we have, which is permanence. Permanence. Whether it's a good feeling or a bad feeling, we have this idea, this notion that it will stay. It is permanent, which is our admittance that it has a self. It is a thing, it is a person, it has a substantial beingness, existence, unchanging. So here is also, and not just here with Vedana, but in all of these teachings, Lord Buddha's emphasis on the perception of the impermanence is crucial. That's another straight path to Nibbana, by the way. The person who practices the perception on impermanence, and in this case, if we bring it into the five aggregates, like Lord Buddha is saying here, exposing Vedana as an assassin of Māras, a double agent, meaning, yeah, it's showing you something pleasurable, yeah, but the more you believe that, you're trying to cozy up in this barrel of fast drying concrete, which is ignorance. You're not seeing it for what it is. It's a passing feeling. It can't stay. Nothing stays. So what am I trying to tell myself? How am I trying to convince myself? This is idiocy. Sati will help you, but the teachings, you need to anchor yourself on a solid teaching. And here's a solid teaching from Lord Buddha himself. So we must practice vigilance in knowing and seeing Rupa and Vedana for what they are. So you must strive to see feeling as none other than a wound that keeps oozing with pus, a disease or sickness to heal from. You should look upon feeling as a poisonous arrow, a miserable pain, and the very source itself of such misery. Have you ever had a wound or a pimple full of pus inside, ingrown hair? Painful, especially if it's a big one. You want to get that thing out, otherwise the whole body part hurts. Heat is there. You know something's there that must come out. Oozing with pus. Can you look at feeling like that? When it happens, especially not the painful feeling. Of course, it's a lot easier, right? When we hone in on the painful feeling and saying, oh yeah, you're an oozing pus wound. Ugh. But can we approach the pleasurable feeling like that? This is not being masochistic, by the way, or sadomasochistic towards the experiencing of life. The experience. You're not trying to practice austerities or self-denial. No, you're watching things the way they are without the extra commentary from ignorance department, from the Māra department. That's another way of understanding that Māra is feeling. For this reason, those who indeed have the right vision, that is, the ability to correctly see feeling for what it truly is, are the ones who witness and experience feeling in just this manner, Rādha. No one will give you this right vision. No one can. They can encourage you. When Lord Buddha was asked as to, and also Venerable Sariputta, as to what are the basis for right view, how can you develop right view? Usually the explanation given in the suttas is the voice of another, and yoniso manasikara. The voice of another here is someone teaching you the Dhamma. Now, sometimes, if you're very perceptive, if you're very dedicated to the practice, to your curiosity to understand truly, deeply, you might be able to have that voice of another be the voice of Lord Budha through the suttas you're reading or listening to. But yoniso manasikara has to be there to develop that right view, which takes you to right understanding, which is what we're seeing here. But it requires the fertile soil of your practice. There's no way around that, because that's growth. Three, Rādha, while encountering any kind of perception or memory, in Pali, sanya, it is necessary to know how that perception itself could be none other than Māra himself. That is, the perception one is witnessing may end up ultimately being there to trap and assassinate him, to murder and destroy him. And thus, perception becomes the very representative of death, the gateway and the means by which the person ends up being stuck in the cycles of death itself. Therefore, Rādha, you must constantly be vigilant in knowing and seeing that any kind of perception could be Māra himself. That is, the perception could be there as a matter of fact to simply trap and assassinate you, to murder and destroy you, because ultimately perception is the very representative of death, the gateway and the means by which you end up being stuck in the cycles of death. The repetition part is so important, because if you could just recall one of these aggregates as being a representative of Māra, the whole thing comes apart. Remember in the beginning I was saying about the five aggregates, they're glued together. But it's a glue that can come off with the heat and steam of wisdom. When you take out sanya, already the whole thing it's in shambles, it's destroyed. Avijja cannot function without perception. Conceit cannot function without perception. Craving cannot function without perception. Wrong views cannot function without perception. So you see how important of a role it has. Unfortunately, it is drenched in ignorance, and vice versa. So they perpetuate each other, right? In this way of understanding. So you must strive to see perception as none other than a wound that keeps oozing with pus, a disease or sickness to heal from. You should look upon perception as a poisonous arrow, a miserable pain, and the very source itself of such misery. For this reason, those who indeed have the right vision, that is, the ability to correctly see perception for what it truly is, are the ones who witness and experience perception in just this manner. Rādha. It takes effort to see rightly, correctly. So it will not come naturally, like people have been saying since the 60s and 70s. Oh, just let it be. Just, all that laissez-faire attitude, like, let it be. It'll happen on itself. And you just sit there, enjoy life. And then you have gurus showing up. And you also have that, person and their effort in the practice are now sent to the passenger, actually in the back seat of one's life. You're just letting circumstances dictate what will happen. Well, what is happening is primarily the karma that you've gathered in past lives. That's what you're enjoying. That's what you're experiencing, even if it's a painful experience. If we just take that default, whatever's happening in your life, circumstances, your body, this and that, things that you inherited, let's say. But that is the what part. What has landed in your lap? Call it the six senses, five, plus the mind. But this practice is about how you work with these whats, as in the five and plus the mind sense spheres. What do you do with these five aggregates? If we actually practice by bringing the attention correctly and placing it on top of any one of these aggregates, then these aggregates, instead of ending up being the hook, like a hook, a fish hook, grabbing the hold of a fish from life to life, instead of the aggregates continuing to be like that, they can be our springboard into Nibbana. And that is what has happened with individuals who've worked and attained to right vision. Because a person who has right vision is another way of saying, usually, unless there's other contextual elements that say otherwise, we're talking about a Sotapanna. That means at the most they have 7 more lives to live, and they will never, ever taste the lower realms ever again. That's a good way to understand right vision as to where it can lead. Of course, the person might attain arahantship in this very life. And the way to do that would have been through his attention upon any one of these aggregates, any one of these Māra's representatives. So you turn Māra's agent, Māra's assassin on, against Māra. For Rādha, while encountering any kind of sankhara or habitual tendency, it is necessary to know how that habitual tendency itself could be none other than Māra himself. That is, the habitual tendency one is witnessing may end up, ultimately, being there to trap and assassinate him, to murder and destroy him. And thus, habitual tendency becomes the very representative of death, sankhara, the gateway and the means by which the person ends up being stuck in the cycles of death itself. Therefore, Rādha, you must constantly be vigilant in knowing and seeing that any kind of habitual tendency could be Māra. That is, the habitual tendency could be there, as a matter of fact, to simply trap and assassinate you, to murder and destroy you, because ultimately habitual tendency is the very representative of death, the gateway and the means by which you end up being stuck in the cycles of death. That's another thing. Our culture today has become so soft that we are shocked. Many people are shocked when Lord Budha uses the words kill, murder, murderer, assassinate, butcher, hacking or hacking someone, severing, decapitating. These are heavy, heavy words that if we continue being a soft society, soon it will be a taboo to use them. In fact, the censorship has become so bad that people therefore are infiltrating with their poisonous ways of thinking into reinterpreting the Dhamma and in fact reinterpreting the role of Lord Budha as a teacher. They've turned him into this softy. They pushed him to an extreme as a teacher. Oh, the Buddha never did that. Or a Buddhist monk is never supposed to be that way. When you ask why, what do you mean by that way? Well, being direct, being this, or calling it out the way it is. I was recently translating a verse from the Theragatha. I think it was Kaputiya Theragatha. And he was he used to love to doze off, sleep, while Lord Budha was giving a talk. And one time, Lord Budha actually tells him, stop leaning forward, backward, sideways in the midst of the Sangha that's gathered to meditate and to listen to the Dhamma. You keep that up, and I'm going to come over and smack you in the ear. When I read this, I was like, what? Harshness much, right? And then you read it again in the Pali, and then you try to understand, and you look at other versions. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. And then you see, no. And then you look at the commentary about what? And basically, the Theragatha, which the Venerable was repeating to himself, and many of the Theragatha verses are like that. They had heard Lord Budha or somebody say something derogatory about them and their practice or their behavior. And then right at that moment of awakening, or during or after, they recall that or those verses and they recite it again. And that's how it gets codified. That's how we have them. So when I read that, Lord Budha saying, if you keep doing that, I'm going to come over there and smack you in the ear. Imagine how many people today would dare, Buddhists, to connect the two, the words and Lord Buddha's image together in their mind. There's a cognitive dissonance that happens for many people. They don't want to accept him like that. Why? Because Lord Budha was so kind, compassionate, soft, forgiving. Well, that's a weak teacher if you're always like that. Sometimes you're going to have to use a sharp tool to go in there and pull out something that's been stuck there, a blister, a sharp thing that's there already. We have countless examples. Māra Sutta being one of them. The surgeon has to come in and cut it open, remove the poisonous arrow. That's what Lord Budha has been trying to do. If we allow him and not build this quasi-fake pseudo-Dhamma understanding in our minds and live our lives according to that and keep standing on the conveyor belt towards the slaughterhouse, which is death, waiting for every single one of us, old age and death, because birth has happened already. We're already too committed. What are you doing with this life? Living with a fake Dhamma understanding? Fake Dhamma practice? If you're not understanding the khandhas like this, the way Lord Budha is describing, where they are day by day coming apart, then your practice is false. Your practice is not worth writing home about. You're fooling yourself. I don't care how often you sit, how long you sit, whatever jhanas you're in. If the aggregates are still very nicely packed together, which means conceit, craving, and wrong views are very much there, then you're not practicing Dhamma. Your understanding of the Dhamma is nonsense, baseless, utterly useless. Why would you want to invest in anything useless while having this precious life? That was the question that Lord Budha is asking for 45 years of his dispensation. What are we doing with these teachings? So you must strive to see habitual tendency as none other than a wound that keeps oozing with pus, a disease or sickness to heal from. You should look upon habitual tendency as a poisonous arrow, a miserable pain, and the very source itself of such misery. For this reason, those who indeed have the right vision, that is, the ability to correctly see habitual tendency or sankharas for what they truly are the ones who witness and experience habitual tendency in just this manner, Rādha. And 5, Rādha, while encountering any kind of vijnana or consciousness, this is the 5th of the aggregates, the khandhas. It is necessary to know how that consciousness itself could be none other than Māra himself. Remember, in Buddhism, in the teachings of Lord Budha, we don't have a consciousness. In Western ways of trying to understand mind, the person, soul, whatever, they always talk about consciousness. Consciousness. Well, we know we don't have just one consciousness. We have 6 consciousnesses. Remember, the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the tongue consciousness, the body consciousness, and the mind consciousness, which, by the way, all of them are changing constantly depending on whatever is happening at that time. And they're changing very quickly. Our ignorance is the one that comes in and glues those things together as well to give us the illusion that there is one single consciousness, which is the trap that Western philosophy has been stuck in. Not just Western, but throughout ages. And that's why the Dhamma is absolutely necessary to pull us out of ignorance. Otherwise, there's no light anywhere. There's no understanding anywhere outside of the Dhamma. That is what we see again and again in the suttas, mentioned clearly by Lord Budha himself. So he says, that is, the consciousness one is witnessing may end up ultimately being there to trap and assassinate him, to murder and destroy him, and thus consciousness becomes the very representative of death, the gateway and the means by which the person ends up being stuck in the cycles of death. Therefore, Rādha, you must constantly be vigilant in knowing and seeing that any kind of consciousness could be Māra himself. That is, for example, the sound consciousness. You just heard, because you have functioning ear, the attention was there, and an object, meaning a sound, took place. Well, the air molecules were pushed actually, and the sound reached your inner ear, the eardrum. What happened? All of a sudden, there's an identification with it. But what if your attention was not there? You won't have that. But what if it is? Well, now we're talking of a means to get assassinated, to be murdered, to be destroyed by Māra. Because now you're dwelling on that statement. How could they talk about me like that? And they were doing it bluntly in front of me. Didn't they know I was there? But they were my friends, I thought. They claimed to be my friends, but that was so hurtful. This actually is happening years after the event took place. What's happening? Is there internal turmoil? Is there anxiety? Is there bitterness? Is there anger and hatred? Is there dosa? Do you see? Do you smell Māra there? How did it start? Ear consciousness. You understand how Māra then is equivalent to ear consciousness in that circumstance, in that situation. So Lord Budha is saying the consciousness itself could be a representative of Māra himself, and not just the Lord Budha is not saying just the ear consciousness, he's saying all consciousnesses. So you must strive to see consciousness as none other than a wound that keeps oozing with pus, a disease or sickness to heal from. You should look upon consciousness as a poisonous arrow, a miserable pain, and the very source itself of such misery. For this reason, those who indeed have the right vision, that is, the ability to correctly see consciousness for what it truly is, are the ones who witness and experience consciousness in just this manner, Rādha. Then the Venerable Rādha asked a further question. As to right vision, Bhante, for what purpose is it the capacity to see correctly? And the Blessed One replied by saying, the purpose of right vision, Rādha, of having the capacity to see correctly, is experiencing disgust, becoming disillusioned, nibbida. That's the purpose of seeing correctly. Once you see something correctly, the jig is up. You understand that there was no movie. It's just a blank, thin sheet of canvas, curtain. And the projector was pointed at it, and it was lights and shadows, colors and things, in the dark. And I had to buy into the story, but once you see correctly, you no longer buy into the story because you see the magician's tricks. How could you continue believing the magician once you've seen how he does his tricks? What happens then? Disgust arises. You become disillusioned by it. Bhante, for what purpose is the experiencing of disgust and becoming disillusioned? The purpose of experiencing disgust and disillusionment, Rādha, is to experience dispassion and the fading away of all manner of passions. Not to become or continue having passions. That's not Dhamma. I don't care what you say to yourself. That is not Dhamma. The Dhamma must take you to further and further states of less and less passionate states. Being invested in your feeling so colorful and mood and inspired, all that jazz. That means that you're farthest away from the Dhamma. But that's where people like to stay. Bhakti yoga, Sufism, this, that, what is that? There's a lot of that color. So much passion involved. Well, that's not Dhamma. So the nibbida, the disgust, disillusionment takes you to experience this coolness that comes from the fading away of those passions. But Bhante, this is Rādha, for what purpose is the experiencing of dispassion and the fading away of all passions? The purpose of experiencing dispassion and the fading away of all passions, Rādha, is to experience freedom and release. Vimokha, or mutti, vimutti. But Bhante, for what purpose is the experiencing of freedom and release? The purpose of experiencing freedom and release, Rādha, is to experience Nibbana. But Bhante, for what purpose is the experiencing of Nibbana? Ah, Rādha, now you've asked a question that is far beyond your level of understanding! Exclamation point. You should therefore know that there are limits to your questioning and what it is that such queries could provide for you. That is, with mere intellectual responses you're seeking. Many people come to Dhamma talks or attend retreats, this and that, to add more data, to add more things, sound bites, to drop here and there, to sound more interesting, to sound more knowledgeable, to sound more released, sound liberated, to sound noble. But that's basically turning them into more and more of an empty, hollow pot. It's like a drum, empty. Why? Because there's dissatisfaction, not the right kind. Because they're stuck in ignorance. No good thing is happening. But hopefully that was not the case here with the Venerable Rādha. But we know that he was not an arahant. That's why Lord Budha is saying you've reached your limit of questioning, because that's beyond your a mundane vernacular would be your pay grade. That's beyond yours. But Lord Budha compassionately goes and sees a potential in Rādha and says, however, know this, Rādha, the holy life unmistakably flows and merges into Nibbana. The main goal and consummation of living the holy life is Nibbana itself. Therefore, Nibbana itself is the culmination and very purpose of living the holy life. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We don't practice the Dhamma for anything else. This is the way I understand it. This is the way, after so many years of studying it and realizing that it's all based on practice, you got to go back into the practice part. You have a different appreciation. That's when the Dhamma comes alive. It's not data. It's not, otherwise it's junk. It's just junk. Who cares about more and more data? It's weight, you're carrying dead weight. Information is dead weight. In fact, it is giving you the boost of having more and more of an ego. It enhances your conceit, craving, conceit, and wrong views. That's the last thing that Lord Budha wanted. For us to take the Dhamma and turn it into some type of a, zeros and ones, data for us to carry around, to sustain somehow. What? The sense of permanence, the sense of which is the undercurrent of everything we do. Seeking permanency. Remember, I was saying it, I think, last week. where within the thing that is impermanent, we're seeking permanence. That's a distortion, that's a contortion, that is a perversion of the mind. Even Dhamma can and has become that for many, many, many people, practitioners. So the Dhamma has nothing to do with how cozy we feel with what is taking place, or in regards to certain things or things that we like or enjoy, basically. That's an infantile way of living, childish. We need to snap out of it, grow up and mature, own up, and see what we're doing. Is my relationship with Rupa getting me to an understanding that is not intellectually based? Because experiences is what we're gathering. Experiences is what we are, like hogs, basically, hoarding, keeping, taking, experiencing, adding more weight, and pleasurable experiences, mind you. We love collecting them. We forget that these are assets. These are upadhi in Pali, assets, things that we value, considering them to be equal to life. Meanwhile, they can't be. Because when you think that you have something, what that means is you believe firmly in this thing called permanency. You've made that thing, in your mind at least, permanent. And then life comes and smacks you in the head and tells you, and there's nothing permanent, because sorry, I've taken it away from you. People toss and turn, get very, in tragic states because they can't get into that jhana they were able to. What happened? Where did it go? But the Dhamma always is teaching us to be emptying constantly, not adding, not collecting, not amassing, but emptying. We need to empty the boat constantly, as the phrase goes in the suttas. Lord Budha says, empty the boat, Bhikkhu. Empty it. You'll cross the flood quicker, swifter, and get there faster. So seeking permanency in experience is, in essence, that latent, hidden driving force, undercurrent, that's always there, which we never check on. So can you bring in sati to question yourself, to have yoniso manasikara, wise, radical attention placed on the experience, whether it's rupa, whether it's vedana, whether it's sanya, whether it's sankhara, whether it's vijnana. Observe carefully. Am I attaching myself to any idea of permanency with this thing, which is passing, transitory? And if you do that, if you can recall to do that even once during the day, already you are seeing the glue coming off between those aggregates. An arahant is a person where those aggregates have come apart. They're still there, but they're apart. They're not glued together. There is no panchupadana khanda. There is none of that grabbing onto these aggregates as me. An arahant has moved beyond. That's why they're an arahant. That's why they're released. So they're just dragging on the burden of the body, having to deal with the body and its needs, etc., until the end of life. That's why they can never take rebirth again in any realm. They have left sankhara, the samsaric journey behind. There's no birth. That's why we call it deathless state. And that's how powerful it is to have yoniso manasikara, placing it at the right thing, versus ayoniso manasikara. These are not just terms that you need to memorize and that's it, randomly just toss them out there, tell yourself these are what they are, when they are not being applied even a little bit during the day. If you do and understand, that's why these suttas are so crucial for us to come back to, not just listen once. No, that's doing it a huge disservice. You need to listen to it again and again and again, because you have missed some things. I know I listen to them. I reread the suttas. It's like, what did I miss? All of a sudden I realize, oh, wow, I missed this. How come I didn't see this? Anyhow, I want to get to the Satta Sutta. I didn't realize it was going to take that long of a time, but it's, as you can see, it's such a juicy sutta, the one we just did, Māra Sutta. So this one is it comes right after, from the same series. I'm not going to list them out as to where it is from. So know that it is SN 23.2. That was 23.1, Samyutta Nikāya. So it is Satta Sutta. I translate it as, what is a sentient being? And again, here is, I'm paraphrasing, Venerable Rādha is there, and Savathi's Anathapindika monastery, approached Lord Budha, and after respectfully paying homage to him, he sat to one side and began asking a question. Bhante, people keep exclaiming, sentient being, sentient being. But Bhante, what exactly is being referred to here by the term sentient being? How is one to clearly define what a sentient being really is? And the Blessed One, Satta is the Pali term for it, sentient being. And the Blessed One replied by saying, Rādha, while encountering any kind of form, Vedana, Rupa, whenever the person experiences any kind of desire or longing for that form, any kind of delighting in or wanting to grab and cherish that form in any way, or thirst for more of the experience pertaining to that form, then one would be correct in referring to such a person as a sentient being. That's not what we were expecting. Again, just like the case was with Māra's, the definition of Māra, here we're seeing Rupa being the criterion, the person's relationship to Rupa being the criterion for them to be called a sentient being. Why? Because there is an identification, as you see, with the Rupa, with the shape, with the form. People are mesmerized by the forms around them. They give their lives to forms, to ideologies, to things, to new experiences. Sentient being. Rādha, while encountering any kind of feeling, Vedana, whenever the person experiences any kind of desire or longing for that feeling, any kind of delighting in or wanting to grab and cherish that feeling in any way, or thirst for more of the experience pertaining to that feeling, then one would be correct in referring to such a person as a sentient being. Again, it's almost like a robot that had its, I don't know, command center taken off or, cut off, and the rest of the body is just doing things automatically. That's what we are, what we've become. We are functioning on how we feel. And that's pretty much why you have the sales industries making so much money. That's how people gain wealth. That's how politicians rule. That's how they keep changing. But the people stay dumb enough to believe. We've become addicts of, for example, of fear. So the media and everything else, whatever your ears and eyes are exposed to, are dealing with fear. So you have more of a excuse me, we have fear has more credence for us. We believe things if they are fearful now, more so when there's something good that's happening in the world. That's convoluted, that's sick. But that is when there is a being, a sentient being, who is completely driven by Vedana, how they're feeling towards certain things, meaning likes, and not enjoying feeling other things, meaning dislikes. Pendulum existence. And that is what most people are. That's the level we are on. That's why Lord Buddha said most of the people, it's very little when people die, a very little amount of people, very few of us will end up coming back as humans, let alone coming back as devas. Majority of the population will end up in hell. Majority of the population will end up in the Peta realms. This is one of the reasons why I emphasize the importance of discussing these other aspects, important aspects, crucial aspects of the Dhamma that modern day Dhamma teachers do not want to touch. When Lord Buddha was talking, because you have to tell people what is waiting for them. Instead of celebrating and teaching them how to dance, how to enjoy, how to be lost in these ideologies, and not have these ideologies actually serve a purpose. The purpose being served here is ensuring that the person will never have to taste such realms again, because these realms exist. That's why Lord Buddha said so, that the person has more chances of being reborn in the lower miserable realms than even as a human. He not even getting to the Deva realms. That's another thing we need to consider. Rādha, while encountering any kind of perception or memory, sanya, whenever the person experiences any kind of desire or longing for that perception or memory, any kind of delighting in or wanting to grab and cherish that perception or memory in any way, or thirst for more of the experience pertaining to that perception or memory, then one would be correct in referring to such a person as a sentient being. We love ideas. Sometimes there are people who live for a dream, live for an ideology. And they're not few. Actually, they're a big chunk of society today. People have no idea what this empowerment thing that they've been shoving down people's throats or minds is all about. Staying with sati, staying in the present moment, staying in your body is one of the best ways that you can empower yourself and help the world around you without squeezing the life out of anyone else. There's so much metta in that form of empowerment. Empowerment does not come at the cost of someone else's liberties, at the cost of someone else's integrity. For example, empowerment. That's a sanya right there, a perception, an idea, or even a memory. People love memories. They want to repeat certain memories or get stuck in those memories. Or they're haunted by certain memories. It's not just looking at the positive aspect of these things. You can also be running away, which means you've also materialized, anthropomorphized that thing, made that into a thing. Therefore, now you're being called a sentient being because you don't have the CPU, the central processing unit, as you know, the brain of the computer is missing because you're not detecting what's happening. You're just an automaton running on impulses, as it were. Rādha, while encountering any kind of sankhara or habitual tendency, whenever the person experiences any kind of desire or longing for that habitual tendency, sankhara, any kind of delighting in or wanting to grab and cherish that habitual tendency in any way, or thirst for more of the experience pertaining to that habitual tendency, then one would be correct in referring to such a person as a sentient being. Sankharas are like the molds. Molds like a cheese mold, a mold where you pour gold into, or anything that takes a certain shape, gives a substance its shape. When you have the sankharas dictating who and what you are, then whatever new experience comes, it's going to go through the sifter, through that mold of the sankhara. So you're living through the stampings of the past. You're not living in the present. But how can you know that this is happening? This is taking place when there is no sati, when there is no honesty, when you're holding on to rubbish. Even rubbish, here I'm referring to taking on at face value, or not even that, taking terms and terminologies of the Dhamma and considering them as your lived experience of truth. Meanwhile, they're just concepts, weight, dead weight, jargon, dead. Sati has to become brought in so that you see what's happening. Oh, well, this is a new experience. What does that, my tendency is to think that, well, I was treated this way, this and that, so I'm going to have, no, let's put that aside, that storyline, narrative. Let's look at this for what it is. Let me start by being grateful that this, I'm alive, yes, and I'm also able to experience new things, okay. So can I see this with fresh eyes? Then you're no longer a mere sentient being, according to this Dhamma and discipline of Lord Bhuda's. Now you're able to process, to understand. Now you're on the way to actually have right vision, which we saw in the Māra Sutta just earlier. Rādha, while encountering any kind of vijnana or consciousness, whenever the person experiences any kind of desire or longing for that consciousness, any kind of delighting in or wanting to grab and cherish that consciousness in any way, or thirst for more of the experience pertaining to that consciousness, then one would be correct in referring to such a person as a sentient being. Remember, we have 6 consciousnesses, as I was saying earlier. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. Even if you're holding on to some idea, even if the idea has to do with the Dhamma, if there is holding on, guess what? There is also craving, there's conceit, and there is definitely wrong view. Imagine, Rādha, I love this image, a group of boys and girls sitting and playing by the seashore, while also building sandcastles. Did you know that Lord Budha talked about sandcastles? Right? Now, so long as those children have not dropped that passion and desire, the longing and greed towards those sandcastles, then they will continue to delight in them or want to grab onto and cherish them, while still having the thirst for more of the experience of building those sandcastles, relating to them as things that belong to them. However, the moment those children do go ahead and drop that passion and desire, the longing and greed towards those sandcastles, then all delighting and cherishing for those creations is obliterated in them, as their relationship with those sandcastles comes to an abrupt end. Suddenly, they don't care. They might have spent a considerable amount of time building the sandcastle. And look at the image Lord Budha gives. And as a result, they so easily and without any hesitation dismantle and smash those constructions that they built, as they destroy them with their tiny hands and feet, turning those sandcastles back into the piles of sandy grains they once were. If you had touched the sandcastle a moment earlier, the child might have started screaming and this and that. saying, no, don't touch it, that's mine, that's my castle. Now they're just destroying. Why? They've lost that passion for it. They dropped it. Now, in just the same way, Rādha, your mission should be to go ahead and drop any passion and desire, the longing and greed towards all kinds of forms, whereby all delighting and cherishing of form is obliterated in you. As you too dismantle and smash form and your identification with form, destroying it into smithereens. You must do this by practicing constantly as you completely smash and destroy that thirst and craving in you for more things. It's not the form that you're crashing and smashing, by the way. Huh? It's the thirst we have. It's the thirst we have. Similarly, Rādha, you should drop any passion and desire, the longing and greed towards all kinds of feelings, whereby all delighting and cherishing of feeling is obliterated in you. As you too dismantle and smash feelings and your identification with feelings, destroying them into smithereens. You must do this by practicing constantly as you completely smash and destroy that thirst and craving in you for more things, more feelings. Similarly, Rādha, you should drop any passion and desire, the longing and greed towards all kinds of perceptions and memories, whereby all delighting and cherishing of perception is obliterated in you. As you too dismantle and smash perception and your identification with perception, destroying it into smithereens. You must do this by practicing constantly as you completely smash and destroy that thirst and craving in you for more things, including concepts, sannyas, perceptions. In one sutta, Lord Budha is advising Venerable Mahamoggallana before he became an Arahant. He said, Brahmin, don't be negligent in taking away the importance of Animitta Ceto Samadhi, which is the Samadhi of the signless. Signless. Being signless means you're dropped or you are dropping your reliance on concepts, ideas, things, objects in the mind. Upadhi, or what I was saying earlier, assets, those things are being relinquished by the millisecond. Remember the statement I shared with you earlier about empty the boat, Bhikkhu. That way you will sail faster and reach the other shore. Emptying the boat means emptying the heart, the mind of all your ideas and concepts, your longings, your attachments, your passions, your loves, adorations, and all that jazz. Similarly, Rādha, you should drop any passion and desire, the longing and greed towards all kinds of sankhara, or habitual tendencies, whereby all delighting and cherishing of habitual tendencies is obliterated in you. As you too dismantle and smash habitual tendencies and your identification with habitual tendencies, sankharas, destroying them into smithereens, just like the children did with the sandcastles. You must do this by practicing constantly as you completely smash and destroy that thirst and craving in you for more things. Also, Rādha, you should drop any passion and desire, the longing and greed towards all kinds of consciousness or consciousnesses, whereby all delighting and cherishing of consciousness is obliterated in you, as you too dismantle and smash consciousness and your identification with consciousness, destroying it into smithereens. You must do this by practicing constantly as you completely smash and destroy that thirst and craving in you for more things. This, Rādha, because Nibbana itself is none other than that very destruction and complete elimination of the constant thirst and craving for more. Please do not take your presence here in this body, in this life, with this access you have to the Dhamma for granted. Do not take the energy you have already within you, in your heart, in your muscles, in your body, in your mind, in your determination, lightly. There's so much you can do, so much you can actually accomplish, so long as you're alive, because you must work with a clear mindset that once you are dead, after this life is over, this body, you throw away your body, you're done. You must assume that you will not be able to work on yourself. The Dhamma will not be available for you for an incredibly long time. You won't have the capacity to practice. You won't have the ability, the situations, circumstances, the tools, the information, the memory to practice again for a very, very, very long time. We must function, we must work, we must practice with that clear understanding, that clear directive, in order for us to make the most of this life. Otherwise, this life will be just like any other life that you've already had. Enjoying, partying with this body and the six senses, and then you start complaining, ouch, ouch, my body hurts this and that, how come it doesn't work as well? Memory starts failing, joints don't work, and you die after some pain and discomfort, some years. And then what? We have to stop taking it for granted. The Dhamma, your place, and your time. Dhamma has to come first for you. It's not for me, it's not for the Lord Budha, of course. He's been dead 26 centuries ago. It has to be understood by you that this must be, if you really know what's good for you, really, you will push away all the other stuff. They don't mean ultimately much, despite how lofty they might be or sound. Culturally, this, that. You're at the moment of death. What are you thinking? That has to be in the front of your mind, always. And not seek how to have a cozy life, how to have a life that is very, why shouldn't I have that kind of a life attitude? Looking for permanence. So the senses are, or pertain to, the what we've inherited, thanks to the good actions we've committed in the past. Okay? Now we have this tool, we have this vehicle, we have the ability to, and we are incredibly fortunate that the Dhamma is still available. Okay? Not enough good things could be said about that fact, by the way. So now what do I do to maximize on that? That's a term that a lot of people use these days. Economics, this, that, leadership classes and whatever. Maximizing, optimizing, right? Can you optimize your life to be an arahant? Even before that, to be free from suffering. How about that? Can you maximize your options, your odds, the resources you have? That's what if you have two legs that function, guess what? You have tremendously useful resources. Go say that to a person who doesn't have those legs, has to negotiate with a set of wheels or crutches. Someone who's blind and you have eyes. Someone who's lost their ability to think. A lot of people are losing that thanks to these addictive tendencies of video games and malnutrition, toxic things that the mind is being exposed to, men and women. The brain is unable to hold enough information. And one of the best ways to know if you are falling into that category is if you are sitting in and paying attention to a Dhamma talk like this, and halfway through it, or even 10 minutes into it, you find yourself yawning and wanting to go to sleep. Guess what? The size of your brain is shrinking. That's another thing that sati comes in and helps you with. So that means you're not challenging yourself enough to push yourself out of that stalemate, that ditch. So you need to constantly muster up the energy to shake all that gunk, the dust off, and come back to 5 aggregates. Use the body. Lord Budha says it's made out of 5 aggregates. Okay, what is it? What is the 5 aggregate again? Okay, Rupa. Write it down, put it on a piece of paper, stick it on the wall right next to your door as you go in and come out of your room or the bathroom. Put it over there just so that your eyes could see it, and then it starts recalling. This is when you're starting to develop the attention. We have to use all tools. And the suttas are simply another. So I hope this was helpful. And if there are any questions I would like to address. If there are none, then we can just transfer the merits. Akasatha chabo mata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu loka sasanam. Akasatha chabo mata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasatha chabo mata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well. May you be healthy. May you experience different layers of happiness every day. Realizing the greatest part of happiness is found when there is right vision in your heart. You're seeing things, you're understanding things a lot clearer than you did before, which has a lot to do with being honest. But how much you're putting in, how much you're evaluating your life, valuing your life and the Dhamma in your life. That's when you breathe life into the practice every day, every moment, every moment. May you be well, protected by the powers and blessings of the Triple Gem. Until next time. Sukhi Hot.